Hello, hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome back to the podcast. So, today we wanted to talk to you all about our habits and what we are doing to create healthy habits to lead a successful life in particular, because we know at this point we are all here to make changes to our life to improve, to just lead that successful life, whatever that means to each individual. And I know for me in particular, I actually just, when was it now? A few weeks ago, I think I just finished reading The Atomic Habits. I think James Clear wrote that, right? So that book was so life changing for me because it just taught me so much about what I was doing wrong when it came to kind of trying to create healthy habits in my life. And that's kind of why I want to talk more about maybe the bad habits that we've had that we've kind of had to chip away at, and then creating healthy habits now in our life to kind of propel us forward and create a successful life for ourselves. So to start with, it sounds like you've also read that book, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well on creating habits as a whole. But I want to start with any kind of bad habits that we've maybe had in the past that we've realized aren't doing it for us, aren't getting us that lifestyle that we want, and things that we have to kind of get rid of, because bad habits are quite hard to actually, totally remove and like just stop doing altogether. So has there been anything that you have struggled to like stop doing that was unhealthy or bad, but you've managed to stop it?
Well, the list is endless, Farah.
Don't.
I feel like I've spent my entire life like wiring my brain to bad habits, and I don't mean that in like a self-deprecating way.
Yeah.
I mean in the sense that all the habits I was never intentional about my goals and wanting to be successful. I was very like, I did things as they come. Like I thought I had to get certain grades at my A level, so I just tried to study. I didn't like think, okay, I need to get an A star. How am I going to make this a reality? Like, what does this mean for my studying schedule? I literally just like woke up and took each day as it comes. And I've talked about this a little bit before in like other podcast episodes, but I haven't grown up with a lot of discipline around me. And that is not like a bad thing on my family or like the way I was raised at all. It was just that I think, a classic dysfunctional South Asian family, there's just a lot going on in the household, and like being disciplined about our healthy habits just wasn't a priority. And I get that, but it's just meant that the habits that I did end up forming were bad. And I think this is a distinction I learned, like as I learned about habit building and everything in the last few years, is that everyone has habits. It's just that some of them are not so positive, and some of them you have to really build and develop on. So my bad habits were, it was all to do with kind of eating. Like I never really used to think about my food, like the health content of the food, or preparing things in line with like longevity and mental well-being. I didn't ever make it a priority to exercise. I would just do it as a means to an end that I thought would solve a very temporary problem that I was having. I never woke up at a certain time. Like I was never a morning person, and I thought that I lacked the habit of getting up early, when really what I had was the habit of going back to sleep when my alarm went off. Or
Okay.
my habit was going bed late because of other bad habits I had in the evening that did not result in me going to bed at a decent time. So I think my habits were all related to like the lifestyle I had, that I still have elements of now, because they're all things I'm trying to like rework, because habits are literally just like reactions that your brain is used to like carrying out, to put it in a very like unscientific way. It's like things, I think James talks about this as well, and like James Clear in his book, he's also based a lot of like the theory and stuff he talks about in Atomic Habits on another habit book by, I think his name is Charles Duhigg or Duhigg, but I can't remember what the book was called, but it was all based on like the science of habits and like, the whole cue routine reward thing, my cue and routines were always negative things, and the reward always stays the same. I think that's the thing as well that I've learned. Like, the reward of not pressing snooze on my alarm and turning back to sleep was like the little comfort of not having to get up, right? The reward of overeating on my meal or like having way too much dessert was the little dopamine hit I got from the intense amount of sugar I was having in a 5-minute period. There's like so many things I can like reframe now and be like, okay, well, the actual lead up to my feelings was a negative thing, but my feelings were still the same. Like the same feelings I have now, I've just changed what triggers them. I think that everyone has a point in life where they read Atomic Habits and you now view your life as before reading Atomic Habits and after reading Atomic Habits, because it's so life changing. It really does like reframe the way you look at yourself and like the way you're actually reacting to things because of this whole like cue routine. What is it? Cue routine reward. I think it is. It's something like that. Being able to break down your habits in that lens. So yeah, I feel like I don't have like an exact list of bad ones, but the morning one is a big one for me because it's something I'm still trying to work on, and the eating one, and also the exercise habit, like, well, the lack of, I guess, exercise habit that I had and how I've started to build that now. I also have a bad habit still of being on my phone. I don't know if you...
Yeah, that's something that trying to. I actually have had in my mind for such a long time to just have a detox day. I feel like even the thought of a day of just not touching my phone sounds like so difficult to do. But I feel like once I get over that hurdle, it'll probably make it so much easier to have like periods of time, even because there's not a moment of the day where I'm not literally like sat next to the phone, or even if I'm not using it, I feel like I have to know it's there and accessible, and I feel like that is so unhealthy.
Yeah, it is. And
So
like, have you ever caught yourself going on your phone and like automatically opening an app, like without thinking?
without thinking, yeah.
Because I've caught myself this week. There's been times where like I'm cooking and I haven't got my phone on me, and I've literally just like I've got bored for a second, like a second where I'm waiting for something to cook or something to boil, and I'm suddenly looking for something. And in my head, I'm like, what am I looking for? Like, why am I looking for my phone right now? Because nothing's gone off. There's no notification going off. Why am I like doing this?
Yeah, I've definitely done that before. Like if I've gone to put my phone on charge, it's not in the same room as me, and then I just you kind of forget that like you don't actually need your phone with you right now, or you're not like actually using it, but you're so used to it's that habit of like picking it up, or even like checking the time, or just any use of the phone. I feel like, yeah, it's kind of mad how, but we've conditioned ourselves to do that, which is the weirdest part. It's like you don't it's so weird how, like you were saying, you just end up like in a cycle, because in the book it does talk about how like your habits, they're not always like just conscious things. It's just like you routinely doing the same thing over and over, and it just becomes that automatic thing where now you're not actually consciously thinking, but you're still carrying on that like routine or that habit. So, and I think that's when it becomes difficult to undo it, because then you have to start thinking about that thing that you've stopped thinking about, because now it's just that unconscious habit.
Yeah.
That
Well,
it's
you've
that
made it easier sometimes. Like, that's what bad habits are. Bad habits are habits because they're easy to do.
Yeah.
Like, if you've for years I have not gotten up at a certain time. For years I have not eaten like healthy food. For years I've reached for my phone when I feel bored.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's totally acceptable and expectable, if that's a word, that my brain is now like it just automatically does those things. Like, I've made it easy, and also I think our brains are like wired like that. Like, you do something enough times, it's gonna get better at doing it. So you do a bad thing enough times, it's gonna get better at doing the bad thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's actually like a good thing that our brains are so like
We'll
good
just
at
pick it
making
up
things
to be
easy.
automatic. Yeah. But what's interesting about that is, do you ever find that, okay, so you automatically kind of pick up these habits because of your routine, but when you want to create a good habit, I find that really hard to do. I feel like when you're consciously trying to pick up a new routine and stick to it, I've actually found it like not an easy task
No,
to
it's because you're trying to
continue.
rewire. Like you're trying to
Yeah.
break that like year long um like rhythm that your brain has got and the way
Mm.
it reacts. You're trying to break that. Like it's made it so easy for itself, and now you're telling it like, oh no, the
You're
last
gonna do
20 years
something
of
else.
exercise that you've just done is wrong. So
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that it's like difficult to build new ones. But before we talk about that, I feel like we didn't get a chance to talk about your bad habits. Like what were
Oh
some of
wait,
yours?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that mainly comes to mind for me is how much I cancel on myself is such a bad habit for me.
Oh
Because,
my god, yeah.
in terms of like when you're trying to reach like success and do new things with your life and, just like move forward. And I'll always have these ideas in my mind of like what I want to do, but I'll like a lot of the times I haven't seen it through. I think I'm getting a lot better at it now because I've just realized that that is actually a bad habit. It's like, yeah, I have the idea and I have the plan and I always go so far before it just falls off and it just becomes another idea or something that just doesn't see the light of day. But I feel like that's such a bad habit when it comes to like trying to be successful in your life because you're only letting yourself go so far before you just kind of give up on the idea. Or I don't know, I think just not following through with something that you, because I always see myself like when I like offer to do something for someone else, or whether when like someone asks me for help with something, I would always like see that through. But I notice that I don't do that when it's the things that I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
And
really right. And like I've noticed that as well. It's like I literally said that to Sam the other day. I was like, if you made an appointment to see someone else on Sunday at 6 a.m., you're gonna try your best to see them on Sunday
that's
at
like
6 a.m.
solidified in your
Yeah, you're
mind
like, you're
now.
not gonna let them down. It's not gonna, even if it's not for letting them down, it's like you don't want it to look bad on you. You don't want to disrespect that person. But if you say to yourself, I want to wake up at 6 a.m. on Sunday and go work out and have a healthy breakfast, you don't do that.
Literally not. And it can be the simplest thing like that. Like, it doesn't have to be something like super crazy, but because it's a commitment to myself, it just feels like it's not as important, which is so bad to say, but that's something that I've been like trying to break a lot, especially when I think about like if I actually like want to make stuff out of my own life and like be successful and move to the next level, you've got to get out of your own way. And I feel like that's a big like thing that I've been doing for a long time is just like being in my own way. But a lot of my other bad habits are very, very similar to yours. Something that because I think I've spoken to you already a lot about this is like me joining the gym because something that I've wanted to do for such a long time is like be just more healthy and more fit. Like I don't want to like be a like someone that's like super super crazy about fitness in the gym, but I just want to be more healthy and more active. And it's something that is so funny because since I read that book and it talked about how habits are like the way to stick at habits is to make it easy, convenient, enjoyable. And you know what? That actually blew my mind because I'd never, up until that point, seen habits as something that you should enjoy or something that should be easy. I've always viewed it as this thing that's going to be something that you have to like literally drag your heels through, and like it's just going to be such a difficult thing to now rewire your brain. It doesn't have to be like that. And I actually was so shocked when that like clicked in my brain. I'm like, actually, if I want to do this new thing, I don't have to make it the most difficult thing in the world. I can actually make it easy for myself, and I can join a gym that's super close to me. I can join a gym that actually has nice facilities and it's gonna like actually make me want to go more and be more motivated to do it. Like, you can make your habits more enjoyable, and that doesn't mean that, I don't know, in my head I thought that that meant that I was like cheating in some way,
Yes, yeah,
which
I
is
know
so
exactly what you
weird.
mean. I had the exact same revelation as well. Like it's weird because you think that if something's good, it has to be difficult. So therefore,
Yeah.
if it's not difficult, it's not good, which doesn't make any
Well, like
sense.
good for you, like something that is good for you to work on yourself and or be better at something. You feel like it has to be this really difficult path, otherwise it's not of value almost. But it's so weird how like our brains are wired to view things in that way, because I don't know where that came from. I
I
just
think it might just be kind of like societal like association of convenience
hardware.
with laziness, and laziness with not so many good things. Like, I think
Yeah.
if something's too easy, it doesn't feel worth. It's the same as like a gym workout. Sometimes if I don't sweat, I feel like it wasn't a good workout when actually maybe I just pushed myself and I was just not in my luteal phase, so I wasn't sweating. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many different reasons for why something might be easy. And I think reframing that, like it was in the book, like it did blow my mind as well. It's so funny that you're going through the same thing. Like, I think I spoke about like my favorite lessons from Atomic Habits in a YouTube video, and that was one of my favorite lessons, like the fact that if we want to make it easy, we should just make it convenient, because we're we're lazy. Well, as humans, we're like wired to make things convenient and like do the things that are convenient. So like, why not make your good habits convenient? It seems
Exactly.
like nonsensical.
It seems like an absolute no-brainer when you put it like that. And it's like, well, yeah, if you want to like stick at something, make it as easy as possible, that there is no barrier to entry. But almost like my brain has told me for such a long time that only the things that are worth doing are hard. Like, only the things that are going to get you the good results are hard to do.
Yeah,
So
that might
you
be a
have to push
cultural
through
thing
it.
as well, which isn't probably not as
Maybe.
healthy. But I think it just also adds to that getting used to an easier life, like not thinking that things have to be difficult in order for you to sleep in bed at night and think, I worked hard today.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a whole other ball game. Is like the idea, like something I want us to talk about a lot more is this idea of like the 9 to 5 working world and like working for that amount of hours and stuff as well. Because I do just think like this idea of working longer hours or doing things that are more difficult when actually there's a simpler way to life as a whole is so mind blowing, because you just then think, well, when you want to transition to that life or you want to make things easier for yourself, you have to then get over that mental barrier of like, well, is this worth it? And is this of as much value now? And am I successful in the way that I want to be? Because it just, does it mean something different now because I've not worked as hard for it, or it's not been as difficult for me to get to that point?
Yeah, it sounds like we need to accept what our definitions of certain things are. And if we
Mm.
bring it back to habits, it's like we need to accept that a definition of a habit is not something that is hard. And I
Yeah.
think understanding that will then allow you to be like, okay, well, I can make it easy then, or I can make it convenient, or I can make it, I don't know, what's other than easy and convenient to say.
We get it. We get the
Yeah, you
point.
get what I mean. But yeah, I think, um, what are some other kind of things you've taken away from Atomic Habits that you like?
I really like the habit stacking method. So as well as making things easy, I think that's kind of on a similar vein, because it's just making sure that your habits feed into your existing life. And that's something I used to struggle with a lot, is like having this thing I wanted to do, then having to almost feel like I had to clear this massive path for it and like dump it into my life where it didn't really fit and trying to make it work, when actually there's so much simpler ways of doing it. Is if you like, we all already have routines, and this is what the book explains, is like, even if you think you don't have a routine, you get up in a certain way, you do things in a certain order. Yeah, like everyone has a routine, even if you've not consciously thought, okay, these are the steps I'm going to take in my morning routine or during the day. So it's just a case of just observing what that is and then seeing where you can fit in these new things that you want to do. And just, yeah, again, hearing it put in that way, I'm like, actually, my life doesn't have to be turned upside down just for me to like get this new thing like involved in my life and just start doing something a little bit differently. So the habit stacking I found really useful in terms of figuring out, okay, this is my routine and this is an extra thing I want to do in my day. Where does it fit best? Like, what is going to make most sense for me to do it before or after? And that has been like so helpful, because it just means that I don't have to find this extra bit of time in my day. You know, like my schedule's always so busy and I've got not enough time to do it. But when you think of habit stacking and you think of, okay, well, when I'm doing this thing, I'm going to do that as well. Or directly after this thing, I'm going to do that. It makes it so much easier to just slot into your day. So,
Are there any habit stacks that you have now or that you're thinking about setting up?
one thing I started doing is with my morning routine. So skincare is something that I've really, really struggled with, just in terms of like, I felt like I knew I wanted to do it and I knew it was a good thing to do. And I used to break out so much as well. So it was something I was motivated to start doing, but I couldn't stick to it. I would do like a cleanse one night and then I'd just be too lazy to do it the next day. And I just really couldn't stick to it. But then when he phrased like that, because I didn't have like a morning or a nighttime like skincare routine. I would literally just like wash my face, use some micellar water, add some moisturizer, if that. It was very, very like just the bare minimum that I could get away with, I would do. And then I started thinking of it a bit differently. So like as soon as when I started brushing my teeth, well, when I was getting ready to like kind of go to bed or waking up in the morning, I would get all my skincare out. Like I would put everything on my sink. And then it was already there. And then as soon as I brushed my teeth, and I wash my face anyway in the morning. So I was like, as soon as I wash my face, I'm just going to put some cleanser on. And then I started thinking about it like that. And now I've literally not, like since the beginning, I want to say it's been a good few months now, and I've not missed a single like night or morning of
Oh,
my skincare.
wow. So you
It's
basically
crazy.
attached like laying out what you need to do to you like brushing your teeth.
Yeah, basically. Or like knowing in advance, because I think before I used to get very overwhelmed with like different products and stuff. So knowing in advance like what I wanted to use, or like what I wanted my routine to look like, and then just knowing, okay, when this moment comes, I'm just gonna have it all laid out there. And then I'm gonna like take the next. It's all about kind of just like the next step, then the next step, rather than like seeing everything as this massive chore.
Yeah.
I feel like if you just look at the one step ahead of you, it's so much easier to just get stuff done that you're not used to doing regularly.
Yeah, you're so right. One of mine is going like calling my mum when I'm on a walk, but when I'm on a walk without headphones and stuff. And you know what's so funny? My brain has now like associated that with, so if I am on a walk and I don't have my headphones, or like I'm on a silent walk essentially, I'll think, oh, I'm going to call my mum. Whereas if I'm on a walk and I've by habit taken my headphones or something, I completely forget to call my mum. Like I've now
Really?
associated like a silent walk with my mum.
That's so funny. But that's actually so good now that it's not something that you are like worried to forget, or like your brain is just doing the work for you
Well,
now.
you say that, but then half the time I am like, when I'm like, oh, I need to get a walk in, I'll just grab my headphones and go. And because I've got my headphones,
Oh, then
I
you
don't call
forget.
it. Yeah, and then I forget. So it's like, it still shoots, like I've still shot myself in the foot, but it's there. Like it's there. I've like made that little wired connection in my brain. And that only took maybe a year of doing that. So that's quite cool, because I think that's something I really set out to do like middle of the year before last. I really wanted to call my mum more, because it's shameful how often I call and she tells me that all the time. So I wanted to make it a goal of like trying to call more. And I did the same thing. I was like, well, where am I going to slot in? Like, because my mum can talk for a while. And I hate hanging up on someone, or like, I also don't like calling for the sake of calling. I don't like being like, oh, hi, just calling, checking in, bye.
Just like small talk.
Yeah. So I was like, where am I going to fit this in? Like, I can't do it. And I decided to habit stack and try and just attach calling her to something I'm already doing, which was walking or trying to do a silent walk. And it ended up not being a silent walk, but that's another. That's something I can.
Music walk.
Yeah, that's something I can work on later. But another thing I'm trying to habit stack. This is actually verging on toxic. But I'm trying to read or watch courses and stuff that I'm like learning while I'm doing cardio. And the reason I think it might be toxic is because I'm not giving my brain a chance to just like,
Yeah, just stop.
yeah, just stop like worrying, because I am very like on all the time, especially now going like self-employed, which probably is the first time I've said that on this podcast.
We need
But
to give more time to that in another episode.
yeah, we can both talk about it, to be honest. But yeah, like I'm always on, so I don't know if like habit stacking could be a little bit too much. Like I feel like using habit stacking as a way to introduce something you're trying to do that's new is a good way to use it. Don't use it in the way that I'm using it, where I'm trying to like do as
Do
much as
multiple
possible.
things at once. So that's interesting you said that, because habit stacking for me is more like, I use it more in a way of like, okay, I've done one task, now this follows directly after it or before it. I haven't used it in a way where I'm going to now do, because I know people do the same, like I'm going to have my morning coffee and then I'm going to read 10 pages on my book at the same time, or I'm going to journal at the same time. I've not used it in the way where I'm like, as soon as I'm doing my normal routine, I'm going to do this at the same time. Because I feel like, yeah, I get very overwhelmed, like trying to, because I feel like once you're already set in a routine and you're doing something, that's enough for your brain to handle a lot of the time. So,
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think like that's why I think it's good to do things that way as well, because like you said at the beginning of the episode, I think the hardest part about changing your habits, specifically changing them, is trying to remove the things you already do. And I feel with habit stacking, it's a good way to not touch what you're already doing, but just add more things in, like as and when they can fit. And then once you've established those good things, then you work on kind of like removing the bad things.
yeah.
Because it all doesn't need to happen at once as well, like the entire change. But you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, like building a life for success or building a successful life. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, because in Atomic Habits, James Clear, he talks a lot about like an identity shift, and how making the habits and changes you want to make is a lot easier to actually action if you make an identity shift, rather than thinking, oh, I need to wake up earlier so I can be a morning person. It's in your head being like, well, I am the person that gets up early in the morning, so why wouldn't I get up early in the morning? It's kind of that kind of perspective on things, because I think that's really important when you're trying to change your life and set yourself up for success, thinking about what that successful person or successful version of you looks like, because that allows you to actually move past the friction that comes along with changing your habits, in terms of like, okay, where's the motivation, where's the willpower and discipline going to come from? That comes from a much easier place if you're thinking about who you want to be, rather than what you have to do to become who you'd love to be. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's that idea of like the better version of you, isn't it? And what does she look like? What is she doing in her day to day? And where's the gap between where we are now and like what she looks like, or what her like habits and stuff are. So no, I agree with that. And that's definitely something that I always try to, so if I like set goals, I always try and look at it as in, okay, so if I want to reach that goal, what is it that I am missing now? That is, if I do that, how am I going to get led to completing that goal or reaching it? So yeah, I guess there's so many ways to look at it, but also I like how in the book he also talks about how like you, as much as you have goals and things, you don't like, they're not your ultimate focus. It's the actual like steps and the
The
priorities and the
system.
day to day. Yeah, the systems, exactly. Because I think looking at that more has helped me a lot. Like it just, when you're looking at habits, it's so easy to like, or your goals, it's so easy to have that in your mind, but then if you don't put like a time frame on it, or if you're not really like set in your systems and what you're doing day to day to reach it, you could have that same goal for like 5-10 years and still be thinking, I'm plodding along and I'm gonna get there one day. But that's why it's not as important. Like, we all need the goals to stay motivated and know what we want to achieve, but it's so much more important to have the systems in place now to know what you're going to do exactly to get to that point. So I think that's also a shift I've made, and focusing exactly what I'm going to do now. And then I guess that helps with the identity shift as well, because when you know what you're doing, you know that you are also becoming a little bit more like that person that's reached that goal more every day. So I like the idea of like focusing on the systems a lot more, and even just like something that I've been doing a lot more, I would say probably in the last year, is just trying to work to my own schedule and what actually works for me, and how, because at the end of the day I think consistency is the most important thing in anything. Like, in order to actually get yourself to the next level, you have to be consistent in what you've identified are your systems and the new habits that you want to make. And I feel like the only way you can be consistent is, as a woman especially, is like really working with your body. And so like you mentioned the luteal phase earlier, and I think that's something that I've implemented more so, and that's helped a lot with me staying consistent with my systems, because it's not something now that sets me back, and it's not something where I get to that point in the month where I'm feeling so like demotivated and so lethargic and so like my mood is off, and it's not that thing now that sets me back when it happens. It's more so I've actually carved out time for this to happen and for me to kind of go through that, but I've allowed that space for it to happen, so I can bounce back now quite quickly, and it's not something that's going to affect me then, and then it's going to take me a while to recover from as well later on, because maybe I wasn't like planning for it properly before. I wasn't really like looking at the signs as much before, so it would creep up on me. So things like that, I feel like have been so crucial in helping reach those goals. So even though I do have periods where I just actually let my body like rest, and we've talked about rest being so important in a previous episode, I know, but things like that, they're kind of like habits that if you're like super high functioning, like hyper independent people like us, you forget that things like rest are actually habits that you probably have to build in. Not like a normal person that just knows that, yeah, my body needs a rest, so I should probably go rest now. So things like that I think have been so helpful in, and it's weird to say like things like rest is what's helped you become successful, but it actually
It's
is.
the whole thing. It's like the bigger picture, I think. It's like what you're saying is, okay, it's all well and good you want to be more active, but if you don't plan for the times that it's gonna be harder to do that because of your luteal phase, and you don't plan for the times that you need to rest because you're a high functioning workaholic, then the end goal of wanting to be more active falls completely apart because you didn't have that system in place. Which I think that's what you're saying, right? And I completely agree. Like, I've done it so many goddamn times where I've written my little goals list in my notepad, shut the book, and then just hoped for the best.
It's like, okay, well, they're in the universe somewhere now, so let's just see what happens and how fast we get there.
Yeah. And I think it's like, it also goes hand in hand with manifestation and the law of assumption and stuff like that. Like, you can't get anywhere if you don't do the things you need to do to get there. And yeah, James is like super, I think he even has a phrase about like the difference between winners and losers is that the winners had a system for winning versus the losers not having a system. Like, it's not the fact they were better, it's the fact that they probably had a system.
Like incremental changes as well. Like
the 1% changes. I think I said that in my YouTube video. I was like, because I picked up on the systems point as well as one of my favorite points, because I do love a system in general. I love being organized and having steps laid out for me.
Personality.
So for me, it was like, okay, great, I have a system, I'm going to fill it up with the 1% improvements. So then you have like the combination of James Clear's like top 5 recommendations and like one little step. But I like an example of a system that I've got this year that I've set up for myself is like, I'm in a very similar position to you where I want to build a bit more self-respect. Like, I don't want to keep bailing on my own goals, like bailing on my own promises that I'm making to myself, even the little ones like, oh, I want to get up earlier and I want to eat healthier, I want to turn down that drink at a social event. Like, there's so many things where I just bail on myself, and I wanted to stop doing that. And I had to really think through like, okay, well, what are the steps I need to take to do that? And then my first thought was, okay, I could read a book. And reading a book was not great because I feel like reading a book about building self-respect is not enough. I needed to do more. So I thought, okay, what are the action steps I could take? And I thought, okay, let's break it down. I don't like the fact I've got an online coach this year, like a PT, is split between, yes, I want my body to look in a different way, but it's like the reason I want it to look a different way is because I want to look in the mirror and like from a purely like vanity related perspective, I want to like what I see, because that's not something I've had for a long time. And then I know that by getting that, like the steps that I need to do to change my body are the steps that I would need to do to build self-respect as well, because I have to honor those things. So I've kind of like tied in a very selfish, like vain goal with a goal of building more self-respect to have this very tangible system, because it's a very like there's a step-by-step way to change your body. Like an online coach can figure that out for me and give it to me in like a broken down system. Whereas trying to build self-respect, I was like, well, how do I,
Where'd you start?
yeah, like where'd you start? Like what are the steps? So I kind of like tried to combine the two, and that's my system for the year, is like just following her steps that she's given me like every month. And she'll change them every week if she needs to. And I know that if I just tick off those daily steps that she's given me, I know I'm getting towards my goal. Like I almost forget sometimes that I have this goal. It's just like daily priorities. I need to get these 5 things done. Which is a nice way to also not feel overwhelmed by your goal as well.
Like, yeah, making it more like bite-sized.
Yeah, making it a bit more bite-sized and digestible.
Something that also has helped me is the idea of just doing, even if you want to do something, or you have a goal, or like you're in your system, you've got this new habit, and even if you can't do it to its full degree, do it in an even smaller form, but do it anyway. So an example of this is when I started the gym, I took a bit of a gap because I think I was traveling a lot and I just
you were
physically
super
wasn't
busy
at home. Yeah, and then I was like, no, I need to get back into this. But then what happens is, especially when I stopped going to the gym, you know, when your body kind of like goes back to its normal self. So then when you go again, you're like super achy and you get all that come back. And then you just don't want to go for a day to like let your body just rest for a bit. But I knew that I wouldn't have like this weekend, I'm going to be super busy. So I wanted to go 2 days in a row. And I just said to myself, like, even if you go for like half an hour instead of like a full hour or 2 hours, or even if you go for 15 minutes, that's better than not going at all. And my mindset, like maybe a few months prior, would have been like, if I'm not going to do like a full hour's exercise routine, there is no point me going. And I just wouldn't have gone, because I was like, well, I know I'm not going to get a full workout done. And that's how I really struggled to keep up with it. And it is definitely something that's referred to, I can't remember like what his term is, to that he summed that up in a nice term in the book, but it was essentially the idea of that winner mentality is someone that's going to go and do something, even if it's in a smaller form. You're still going to show up for yourself and show up as that person that would be someone who works out really regularly. Even if you're going to go and just do it for a shorter period of time, you would still go anyway. And the idea of like not, what is it, when you can miss something once but never miss twice.
I was literally about to interject. It's one of my like top favorite takeaways from that book, because it's kept me so consistent. The
entire book is a big fat huge takeaway. I just am so like, as I'm remembering stuff now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like the amount of like just life-changing like sentences in it. I highly recommend anyone listening to us right now, if you haven't read that book, you honestly need to, if you want to like propel your life forward and just make huge changes and make it easily as well. Like, it doesn't have to be hard. Really seriously read that book and highlight the crap out of it. You should see because I read my books on my iPad, and literally that is probably the most highlighted book I think I have on there.
Really? Oh my god, I'd love to see all your highlights.
There is so many like gems of like sentences as well, like just statements.
Why don't you also make a YouTube video? Because I think I made one being like my top 8 lessons from the book. Why don't you make one? Because I'd love to know yours.
Yeah, I could do that. I think I've definitely like weaved in what I've learned into, I don't remember, there's a video I did recently, and there was an element of that video where I weaved in like some habit stuff that I was like, this is super important because it helps me in my life so much now. But I probably will do that because there are so many in that book. I feel like I'll end up just regurgitating the entire book on my video.
That's literally exactly what I did.
Really?
You know what? It's like a book I want to keep reading every year, because the lessons are so amazing that like obviously like I love the lessons, right? I've written them down. I've made a video about them, but I do forget about them.
Yeah,
And
it's easy to forget. I think it's definitely one of those things that you do need to go back to. That's why I highlight, because then I'm like, if I'm feeling a bit, out of sorts or like not really feeling like I'm keeping up with stuff, I'll go back and just like skim through the highlighted stuff and be like, oh, actually, no.
yeah,
This is how I should be going forward.
yeah.
Um, but it's
But
such
yeah,
a good book.
never miss twice is one of my favorite lessons.
How crazy is that? Like, yeah, miss once, that's okay. But a lot of us, like, if I do miss once, then I'm like, well, what's another? What's another? And then you get in that habit. But it's such a good, because it also allows the flexibility of like, yeah, we're going to mess up one time, or yeah, we're going to get ill, or stuff's going to go wrong. And you are going to need that leeway for yourself. There's no point having these hard rules of like, I'm never going to miss a beat and I'm the worst person in the world if I do. And now game over. Like just allowing that little slip up, but knowing that that can't happen again is such a good mentality to have, because it holds you accountable, but at the same time it allows you to be human. So
Yeah, like yeah, you can like I think my favorite element of it is the fact that you're more likely to come back and stay consistent even if you do take a day off. And you know what I noticed? Duolingo. So I'm doing Spanish on Duolingo right now. And Duolingo obviously has famously their streak feature, but they have a streak freeze. And the other day I was like, they have implemented, like someone on the product team has read Atomic Habits, because this is the never miss twice rule. Because you basically, like, there's been a couple of times where I've completely forgotten to do my Duolingo for the day,
yeah,
but I get a streak freeze. And so when I see it on my app, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to go back and do it. Whereas if they didn't implement a streak freeze and you just lost the streak, you'd be like, oh,
that'd
I've
be
lost the
so
streak now. I'm not going to start
upsetting.
again. And the same thing applies to your habits, where you're like, if you have that mentality of like, okay, I can have one day off, but no more than one, you're more likely to actually go back and keep the overall consistency going rather than like bailing on it completely just because you missed
Yeah.
one as well. But yeah, I thought it was so clever. The fact that Duolingo implemented it as well just shows that it's a system that works, because the streak has pulled me back. The streak free, sorry, has pulled me back multiple times. And I do forget my days
Really?
like a lot of times. Yeah.
That's so good, because yeah, it's one of those things where like you can miss once, but like you can miss again another time and you still bounce back. It's not one of those things where it's like one time and done and then you have to start from scratch. So it's just it just makes it a lot more doable if you like, if your mindset is that way inclined, that oh, I've missed once, but I can bounce back. And it gives you that resilience as well, I think.
Yeah, it plays to your consistency, because like you said at the beginning of the episode, the thing with habits is consistency. And consistency doesn't mean showing up for something at 100%, giving 100%, 100% of the time. Like, that's not what consistency is. Consistency is you just showing up like 80% of the time. And like, you kind of reframed it in terms of going to the gym, like showing up at the gym, but not having to give like 100% effort and have this like hour-long brutal workout. I do the exact same thing with my steps. Like sometimes, so I have a 10K daily step goal. And if there's days where I'm not going to hit 10K, like previously, if I wasn't going to hit 10K, I just wouldn't try at all. And it's so nonsensical to look back on, because in my head, I'm like, well, if I was really a fit and active person that prioritized my step goal, I would have just gone for as many steps as I could have gone for. Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
have given up just because I couldn't get 10K.
Some's better than none, yeah.
Yeah. And that just means that, well, that means for over the year that I was trying to get 10K step goal, I managed to walk daily. Versus if I bailed because I couldn't hit 10K steps, I'm just like, just on and off trying on the days I can hit 10K steps. That's not consistency. So it's kind of also reframing how you understand consistency, and making sure it's just the fact that you show up 80% of the time. And I think that also for me helps like understand the whole 80-20 split thing a bit better, because I think, like you said at the beginning, habits don't have to be difficult. It's just showing up for yourself like over and over again in any capacity. So it's like kind of understanding that and making it easy as well. That helps.
I think that ties in with the identity as well, isn't it? It's like if you see yourself as someone that just shows up in whatever capacity that they have, then you you will keep that consistency going, but then you will also be the type of person. So if you are someone that's trying to, have this goal of, I'm going to, be super fit and I'm going to be a gym girl. You can call yourself the gym girl because you've been to the gym even if you've been for 15 minutes one day and then an hour the next day, you're still that person.
Yeah, you
So,
prioritize it.
yeah. So you don't if you were the type of person that I used to be, where if I was intending to go regularly, but then I knew I wasn't going to fit an hour in or I didn't have the time for it, so I just missed it altogether, then you're not really embodying that person that does that as much as you would if you just went for 5-10 minutes. Even if for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you're still that person that goes and does it. So but that's important to remember. Okie dokie then. That was a really cool episode. I hope you guys took some little nuggets from Atomic Habits and the way that we are structuring how we create our daily habits in our own routines. Really, again, recommend you guys go and read that book if you haven't already. And if you have, let us know what your favorite takeaways from the book were. I feel like I'm going to come away from this episode and be like, oh, but this one,
Yeah.
I forgot that. But there's genuinely so many good takeaways and things that you just don't really think of in your everyday. You're just conditioned to operate in a different way altogether. So it is a really good one to read. We really do hope that this episode helped you kind of think more about your habits in your day-to-day. What are bad habits that are holding you back? What are some good habits that you can start implementing and stick to going forward? Let us know again. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and give us a rating if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And with that being said, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.